On Wednesday night last, I introduced Chris Galaptis, the National MP for Clarence, who said he won't be part of a New South Wales government if, as he says, the Berejiklian government continues with green tape that risks strangling drought-recovering farmers with koala checks. The debate's been going on for months and months, but it's clear now the lefties in the Berejiklian government have 10 ears. Everyone's in favour of koalas. That's not the problem. We've had bushfires here and koala colonies have been burnt out, and now we're wanting to blame the farmers. So there's a koala habitat protection state environment planning policy. Cop that. Only bureaucrats could think of it. Koala habitat protection state environment planning policy, which increases the number of protected tree species from 10 to 123. So the landholder has to conduct time-consuming and costly koala assessments on private land. Well, since we spoke on Wednesday night, the coalition rift in New South Wales has widened, or shall we call it a revolt. The New South Wales National Party President, Andrew Fraser, has accused the Liberals of using people in the bush as a, quote, biodiversity offset for development in Western Sydney. He knows what he's talking about, this bloke, and like a lot of them in the bush, he's no softie. He takes aim at city politicians and he says, the people of regional New South Wales are sick and tired of being used, and I could say this for Queensland as well, as the biodiversity offset for Western development. He says the planning minister has allowed hundreds of acres of endangered Cumberland woodland to be bulldozed to make way for Sydney's urban sprawl to the west, and to make up for it, he's locking up land in the regions. Well, so it's now not just Chris Galaptis, but many New South Wales MPs are saying we're happy to move to the crossbench or cross the floor over this, simply called koala check guidelines, which seems to have prompted the Premier. And remember I said last week to Chris Galaptis, they might hate you, Chris, but I tell you what, they like the perks and benefits of government more. So the Premier Gladys Berejiklian now wants the legislation to be brought back to Cabinet. Andrew Fraser is the chairman of the National Party. He knows the scene backwards and he joins me now. Andrew, good evening. Thank you for your time. I just thought we'd get a check-up as to where we are. So Gladys Berejiklian is going to bring it back to Cabinet. I thought this legislation was already in place.
Well, it's a regulation. It's already been gazetted. It's bizarre. It's not just the fact that you've got 123 extra trees. The reality is the maps are showing things such as a roundabout in Grafton, which is now classified as koala habitat. This is not about habitation. It's about habitat. It's about a type of tree that a koala may like to go up. I mean, it is absolutely bizarre. It's something that I believe the government really needs to step back, have a look at it, have a look at the existing protocols that are out there under the existing sets, and you manage it properly. Look, as you said earlier, the bushfires killed more koalas than anything else. And if you look at clearing koala habitat and habitation in Western Sydney to actually then take offsets in regional New South Wales, it's one rule for those in Sydney and another rule for us in regional New South Wales. Are there koalas in the Domain? Are there koalas in Hyde Park? Are there koalas in Centennial Park? No, there's not. It's a concrete jungle and we're paying the price. We preserve and reserve the koala populations in regional New South Wales. We don't need to be told what we can do with our own land, number one. And number two, we are the people that provide the food, the fibre and the timber that will go into those new houses out where they've cleared the endangered Cumberland woodland.
Good on you. Outstanding. I mean, do these people in metropolitan New South Wales know anything about the bush? I mean, this is the greyhounds all over again. They decided, we'll ban all the greyhound industry. Now we're going to make the farmers pay for the fact that there were bushfires wiping out koala colonies. And it's come into effect in March. So what's it mean? Oh, we'll take it back to Cabinet. What on earth does that mean?
Well, this regulation's got to be replaced with a regulation that actually farmers and people living in regional New South Wales can live with. The way it is at the moment, you may as well forget private native forestry. They've locked up all the undercar. They locked up all the productive forests in New South Wales, native forests. The one at Pine Creek, which was in my old electorate, most productive forest in New South Wales, had been operating for 120 years. The State Forest did a study on koalas, said there's 900 koalas in here, isn't that fantastic? Right. They locked it up into a national park and they haven't done a koala since.
So we're going to have koala police. I mean, how in the meantime does the farmer handle all this? Does he just say, forget it, bugger you, I'm getting on with my life?
No, well, he can't do that. I mean, the police will be knocking at his door.
No.
I mean, you will have the environmental police going in there saying, hey, you can't do this. You need development application to X, Y, or Z. In other words, you stop your fibre and your food and your timber production because of some regulation that was brought in by city-based politicians, written by bureaucrats who I guarantee have probably never even seen a koala in the wild. Yeah. Get out in the bush and have a look. There was an article in last week's Telegraph where all the koalas in the bushfire-affected areas of Port Macquarie were burnt. Why? Because of bad management of forests, bad management of national parks. Well, I used to be able to ride a horse through our forest. You can't do it any days now.
I just say, Andrew, Jim Garden from New Lambton has written today, why stop with koalas? Maybe the farmers should also have to ask the kangaroos which days they're allowed to work their land. Farmers and native fauna and have happily coexisted for decades, just like the Murray-Darling River system worked well for everyone without any complaints until the politicians got involved. It's good to see at least one politician, Nationals member Chris Galapta, says my writer, taking a stand against this koala madness. I can just imagine what the straight-talking farmers in the bush are saying about the dumb politicians who come up with this idea. Andrew, we'll keep in touch with you, I have to say, because this is a battle you have to win.
Yep, there are many battles out there. You know, we need to win proper water rights for farmers and for regional communities. We need to win this one because if you don't, you know, I said years ago to New South Wales farmers, why don't you stop for a fortnight all the perishable goods going into Sydney and see what happens then? If they had no eggs, no bread, no meat, no chicken. You know, I wonder how they'd react then. You know, the reality is the implications of this policy can actually affect the food production, food fibre and timber production in regional New South Wales. If they didn't have it on their doorstep, I wonder what they'd say then.
Good on you. We'll keep in touch, Andrew Fraser. Good Thanks, stuff. Well, here's the bright young man that in the world of the media everyone loves, but let's get an opinion from him, Michael. I mean, you can understand those circumstances, can't you?
Surely can. And it reminds me a bit, Alan, of the whole situation with the fruit pickers, because, I mean, again, you've got city-based politicians, don't you, making decisions that really suit and are all about the city.
Michael McLaren, by the way. Very bright young man. We love having the young people. That's the future. They're the tomorrow. Yes, go on, fruit pickers.
Should I say hello, guys, or hello, folks? What one was
it? Oh, yeah, hello.
I can't remember what it is these days. No, but, I mean, it is the similar thing, isn't it? You've got a whole bunch of city-based politicians making decisions about COVID-19 restrictions because there's a bit of an outbreak in Sydney, for example. Now, there's not a case north of Newcastle, to my knowledge, none west, and yet the same restrictions, because it's the state of New South Wales, apply in these industries. And I suppose it's a very similar story, isn't it?
Well, I mean, you've got this business in New South Wales where the Premier would have you, we want major events, we want everything to go ahead, we're opening up the state. And the Tamworth City Council is saying we couldn't conduct the Tamworth Music Festival under the regulations that apply now via the Berejiklian government. I mean, they say one thing and do the other.
But they're one of the better ones. I mean, imagine Victoria for heaven help. But see, the thing is, we still don't know, and National Cabinet, despite all its secrecy, still hasn't come up with, are we going to live with COVID or are we trying to eliminate it? Because short of a vaccine and short of border closures, the only thing you're going to eliminate is the economy.
But why don't they just tell us that 99% of the cases are mild? And you just heard me there before. Now we've got this report, which I just put away here, coming from the Department of Health here, which tells us that in Australia, 9% of the cases had no comorbidity. So only a tenth of all those reported who have died from coronavirus, the others died with it. Just in relation to the other thing I'd like to ask you, I've just had a letter here, a stack of them from listeners, and this is, I just wonder if we're living in a World War II German stalag or perhaps a Russian gulag. He says, our English language is replete with many different words to describe many different situations. I can find none to adequately express my contempt for Andrews, Palaszczuk and McGowan.
Yeah. Well, I can't argue against it. We've had some calls on the open line, as you can well imagine, from people in Queensland saying, we feel terribly safe here, we'd hate to be south of the Tweed. But, I mean, look, what these people aren't small business owners, tourist operators, people that know the moment that the government payments, which are federal government payments, let's not forget. I mean, Anastasia Palaszczuk and Mark McGowan acting all tough, but not paying for the decisions.
No.
We all are.
No, they destroy the economy, and Canberra, through us, goes out and survive, props them up.
And so there's this false sense that everything's okay. Now, sure, in the short term, that all makes sense, but you can't dole out this largesse of welfare in the long term. You don't have the money.
But is Canberra standing up to them and say... I mean, it's an easy answer. I would say, if I were the Prime Minister to Andrews, I'm not telling you what to do. No, you do your own thing. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. GST money is withdrawn until such time as you come to the party. I'm the Prime Minister. I say there should be no lockdowns. I say kids should be back at school. Look at all those kids in Melbourne that won't be at school for 3.5 months.
And the children, of course, doing their equivalent of the HSC.
Yeah.
I mean, the disruption's horrendous.
But then plane loads of the AFL...
Up to the resort, swim together, happy days.
Swim together, happy days.
Your correspondent said earlier, access to the hospitals, no trouble with that. But, of course, people on the border are having to get special permission. The double standards are replete and terrible. But I think, one of the things off the back of all of this, Alan, we're going to have to look at is the constitutional arrangements.
Correct, definitely.
And the separation of powers. It served us reasonably well. I'm not saying we've got a dud constitution, but it's got its shortcomings and they're being proved.
But in this climate, no one, apart from Clive Palmer, is fighting for the Constitution.
Yeah.
The federal government isn't. Now, if the Liberal government isn't going to defend the Constitution, what will they defend?
Well, that's the ultimate question, isn't it?
Just while I've got you here, the economy. You've had some very, very good things to say. I mean, we're talking about rebuilding the economy, but you've made the point that in New South Wales we've got Malaysian buses, Chinese and South Korean trains, Indonesian ferries, Spanish trams on French tracks.
Gee, they went well, didn't they? I mean, when you were doing breakfast, you banged on day after day with the small business people that are being absolutely rooted by that light rail.
Yes.
And, of course, we bought the Spanish light rail on the French tracks because it went out to tender and it was cheaper than if we did it here. Well, I bet after 3 years of delays and the billions it blew out, it wasn't cheaper than if we did it here.
But then they say, we have to get these things built overseas because here the energy costs are too high and the labour costs are too high. Well, who's made the energy costs high? Yeah. All these left-wing renewable energy nuts.
But
and in wages...
On labour.
Yeah, go on.
OK, sure, our blue-collar workers are more expensive than Chinese and Koreans. But what about the people saying you're too expensive, the politicians? I mean, the Prime Minister here, base salary, gets 40% more than the German Chancellor who runs the world's fifth biggest economy. Yeah. Now, who's more expensive? Yeah, the worker here who does the metal work for 25% more, or the unproductive politician who's paid 40% more, saying that the worker's too expensive?
But the people watching you now would think, God, my MP is hopeless. How do you get rid of a hopeless MP when he's on 220,000? He'll hang on. What? He'll hang around.
Plus 15.4 super.
Yes. Well, Michael Kroger often appears on this on Sky News, and Michael Kroger says all I have to do for the 220,000 is to say hear, about 4 times.
Well, shame.
Shame.
That's what we're all saying to them.
4 times a month, I have to tell you. Yeah. And what about the Snowy Mountain wild horses? I mean, can you believe this? They're arguing about how many wild horses there should be in the Snowy Mountains, and some of the Brumbies were killed during the bushfires and so on, so they have a report. Now, 2 first-class trips around the world, not that you could use them now because we can't go anywhere. How much do you reckon the draft report for the Wild Horse Management Plan cost? A draft report for the Wild Horse Management Plan. A draft report.
Oh, that's another one of these questions without notice, Alan.
$930,000.
For a draft report?
A draft report. $930,000. We're the mug taxpayers.
Well, what does it tell us?
Well, hang on. And then on the survey, so we survey. Now, what would you survey? You can't get into the national park. Do you take an aerial view to see where the Brumbies are racing around? Well, the survey costs $470,000. And then the impact study, impact of what? Another $440,000. And there you are. There's been 12 reports on horse management.
Yeah, I hope they found some. But just quickly, on the Brumbies, look, they are an introduced species. No one denies it, but they've got iconic status. But the ultimate introduced species in that part of the world is us. It wasn't the horses that put the roads in or the hydro scheme which blew rocks and flooded valleys. And when we're pretending that somehow the horses' hooves are destroying all of this sacred flora and fauna and we can protect it, when we've manipulated, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but we've manipulated that part of the world unbelievably. Horses could never dream of building dams and pipes and roads and houses.
And then we shut the national park.
They're the problem about it.
Shut the national park and destroy the trails so when the bushfires come, you can't get in to stop them.
And everything burns.
Good on you. Yeah. Good to talk to you.
You too.
Keep doing wonderful work. There he is.
Thanks, Alan.
Michael McLaren.